All right, welcome, welcome. We are going to have what I think will be a very interesting conversation today. I am going to be joined momentarily by, you may know him as Destiny. You actually may know him by any number of names if you ever look at the chat during his live streams, but I won't be using any of those. Others know him as Stephen Bunnell. How you doing, man? Great to have you here.
I'm doing great. How you doing?
Good. So we're going to eventually get to sort of like the meat of this conversation, which will include the last time we talked, we kind of left off with the fact that we don't apparently fully agree about the use of lobbying advertisers to boycott programs. We'll get
hmm
to that. We'll talk about platforming. I'm curious. My views have continued to evolve on the issue of platforming. I'm
hmm
curious whether yours have. But if people are not familiar with you, you were on Twitter? I think you're still kicked off Twitter, right?
that is correct. But I have a friend that posts on Twitter, and he posts a lot of really cool things that I
Okay,
tend to agree with. Yeah.
that's fair. But so people are your biggest following is on Twitch. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, for sure.
I actually have been thinking about whether I should be doing stuff on Twitch. People sometimes write to me and they say, David, instead of streaming on YouTube, you should stream on Twitch. And my reaction is usually, I don't have any followers on Twitch. Wouldn't I just be starting from zero? Like, is there any reason you can think of I just now start on Twitch?
I mean, cross-pollination across platforms is always a good business venture. I mean, like there are people that watch Twitch that don't necessarily watch YouTube. Even if you streamed and only picked up like a few hundred live viewers on Twitch, I mean, one, you've got a big following on YouTube that you can already use to build a following on Twitch, and two, any new viewers you pick up on Twitch are people that might not have ever necessarily discovered you on YouTube. I think from a business point of view, spreading out to different platforms is almost always a good decision, as long as
Hmm.
you're not compromising anything that you're currently on to do it, which I don't think you have to. So
Yeah,
yeah.
maybe I should look. I mean, would I have to do like I just never watched Twitch? Would I have to be
Mhm.
doing drastically different things than what I'm doing now?
The bar for like Twitch content is much lower than like the bar for like YouTube stuff. So as long as let me explain that. When I say that, like you can stream whatever on Twitch. It doesn't have to be like super formal or anything. I know that people usually set a lot higher standards for their YouTube stream. So yeah, I mean you can whatever you stream on YouTube is almost for sure going to be fine for Twitch.
All right. Well, if there's continued interest, I guess I will
hmm
make an account on Twitch and start to figure out what exactly it is I would be doing there.
Do you
So,
have
yeah.
I think there's a I don't know what program you guys use, but there should be literally a way to simul stream. Like you should be able to just push one button and have the identical stream that you're streaming on YouTube go right to Twitch as well. Like that should be, and you don't even have to think about it, you know?
See, now that actually sounds interesting. We for
hmm
the live streams I use OBS, which I think what I would have to do is just add a secondary stream address, and then I might be able to actually stream to both of them.
Yep, I'm almost positive you can do that on OBS, or I know you could at one point in time. So yeah.
So listen, last time you were on, neither of us made a pilgrimage to the Bond Studios in Los Angeles, which is where Jesse Lee Peterson films and records his radio show and his TV program and all of this stuff. So you went out there. Were you going to be in LA already and they somehow reached out to you, or did they actually invite you out?
I actually moved to the LA area so that I could do like live content and stuff. And I guess when they found out I was out here, they reached out and yeah, I went on the show.
So what struck me as most odd about being there? Well, okay, so I mean, first of all, I don't know if people in the audience know, but Jesse Lee Peterson is he has a program which he films out of I guess it's like a Christian men's counseling center, right? Like he's obviously not a therapist, but the term counselor is not regulated, and he offers counseling to men and particularly Christian men, but he also has a studio there. Like, am I saying that correctly?
I did not know that. I thought they were just renting like a conventional studio. I didn't know anything about this counseling thing or whatever.
Yeah, I think that's why, like the name Bond, I think it's initials that mean, so I don't even know what it means. But anyway, that's what he's doing out of there. The thing that
Okay.
was odd to me was that his staff, they sort of seemed to be fans of mine, but it also seemed like they were very hesitant to show that. Like they were almost scared that Jesse Lee Peterson wasn't going to like that and was going to respond maybe in a way that was not good. Because when I showed up, they all immediately, like they wanted pictures and whatnot. And when Jesse Lee Peterson walked into the room, that it very quickly slowed down, and all of a sudden it was like, whoa, is this type of thing okay? It was just a very strange atmosphere.
Yeah, I agree. I had like similar things come up where like a couple of them asked to take pictures with me. Yeah, I don't know. It was pretty strange, but the the way that I kind of view it, this is like my guess, and I've only been there twice, but like it feels like Jesse Lee Peterson is very real, like very much dedicated to everything he does, and it's not like a joke or anything. But the other people that are there are just kind of along for the ride, and they're not necessarily like as committed to whatever fucking mission. Wait, am I allowed to say the F word here? I'm
Oh
sorry.
yeah,
What's?
please, please.
Oh yeah.
It's
Okay.
just a
So,
YouTube stream.
yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Sorry. I should have asked beforehand. But yeah. But it seems like the other people that are there are just kind of like along for the ride, and they're just kind of cool with doing whatever as long as they get paid, and they kind of have fun doing it. And that's like the impression that I get.
Yeah, I'm curious whether. So after I did it, a bunch of people wrote to me and they said, "Hey, is Jesse Lee Peterson playing a character? Is he for real?" My impression is he is 110% for real. I mean, off camera, he was talking to me about voting for Trump. He was making racist comments off camera. He was talking about quote Mexicans and black people and all sorts of stuff. I had no reason whatsoever to question the authenticity of the on-air character that he plays.
Yeah. Same.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Did you get follow up from his audience at all?
Um. I dive into the filth that is kind of alt-right or extreme right YouTube and everything so often that it's hard to tell who comes from what areas in particular. Because I always have so many people that like are saying such crazy shit all the time. It feels to me, based on the call-ins that Jesse Lee Peterson got during the show, and on the comments that he gets on his YouTube, that like a lot of the people that watch him aren't like conventional like heavy internet users. So I don't think that a lot of them like followed me over to like talk shit on my YouTube or on my Twitch or whatever. I could be wrong, but it
Yeah,
just seemed like I just kind of got more of the standard same dumb comments.
I
Although
think you're
other
probably right.
people, yeah, other people on the internet, other like right-leaning people, are like, do you know? I don't know how low you go. Do you know like the Ralph retort or like the kill stream or any of these types of people?
No, I feel like I should because people contact me and they say, David, why haven't you debunked XYZ YouTuber yet? And usually it's like I just don't know who these people are.
It's yeah, you know, you're there. You shouldn't. You're not missing anything of value. But like these people will watch like their streams and be like, "Oh yeah, Jesse Lee Peterson brought up a lot of really good points, or really dunked on," and then those fans will come and harass me. But I don't think Jesse Lee Peterson has the fan base to do that right now. It doesn't seem like it.
I'm working on maybe doing like an in-person thing with him with a studio audience next time I'm in Los Angeles. And part of me is just like so curious as to what that will be like. And then part of me is scared.
Hmm.
I don't know which whether the scared part is reasonable.
You said you're doing an in studio interview with him,
I'm looking at doing a live
uh-huh.
audience thing with him next time I'm in LA.
Or oh, okay. Is it going to be like he's the one organizing it, or you're the one organizing it?
It's unclear. Yeah, that's one of the questions. It's like, are we joint organizing it? Whose audience is going to be there? These are the sort of questions that need to be answered.
Oh, okay, okay,
Yeah, we'll
interesting.
see.
Gotcha.
Okay, so let's start to get into some of the stuff we were going to talk about. So we last time you were on, I think that to summarize and tell me if the summary for where we were last time is wrong, so we can at least
Hmm.
start from the right place. Is that when we talked about platforming, we both sort of have the perspective that there's no like list of people that are okay or not okay to platform. That it's all about what we described as responsible platforming. If the ideas are more or less worthy of being refuted, and if you feel as though you are equipped to responsibly challenge those ideas, that is the sort of basis on which you evaluate whether you give somebody a platform or not. Am I sort of like where we were last time?
Yeah, and I think that's more or less where I'm at. I'm still at that spot now. Yeah.
So let's pick it up there because since there have been since the last time we talked, there are uh, two formats that have become pretty prevalent in terms of political debate. One is these sort of like internet blood sports types of things where there can be anywhere from 2 to 6 people on a stream, and I've done some of them, you've done some of them. I watched one that you did sort of recently, and I guess the first question there is like, what's your assessment of the value of those? Because I do them sometimes and then other times I don't. And basically my decision is based solely on what kind of an audience is it going to get, not on the sort of caliber and quality of the discussion that's going to happen. But what's your sense of that format, which now I guess it's profitable for some people. I don't know. I'm guessing they wouldn't do it if it wasn't.
Wait. Can we hold on? Wait 1 second. I
Yeah.
think your stream cut out for a second. I don't want you to miss too much on your.
My stream cut out or
Yeah, your stream on is having internet problems right now.
huh, that's weird. Seems to be working fine over here, but that's strange.
Does your is your I don't know if you can see the OBS on your computer. Is it like red in the bottom right? Does it look like it's not like transmitting enough internet or?
No, it's all green.
Oh, wait, hold on. Wait, some people are saying it's okay now. Okay, never mind. All right. I've got your chat open and I saw a whole bunch of people. When people put Fs in the chat, that usually means there's a lot of internet problems.
Oh,
But
see, I wouldn't even know that. I appreciate that you're telling.
no, it's fine. Okay. I'm sorry. So your question was basically asking, is there
Yeah,
any
like what's the
value?
value of these internet blood sports? Six people yell at each other and it goes on for 1, 2, 3, 4 hours sometimes. Like, do we gain anything from that?
So okay. So there's like a million ways to talk about this. So I'll try to be as succinct as possible. I think that there are a lot of people that admire people that are willing to go like into the trenches and like viciously defend what they believe against other people. And I think that there are people that believe that that this has a merit in and of itself. And I think that I am somebody that, because of what I do, I think I'm kind of in a unique spot to gather viewers or followers because I'm willing to engage in that. So to be clear, I'm not saying everybody should be willing to, or that everybody needs to, or this is something that everybody should practice to do. But if you can do it, I do think there's a value there, because I do think that people, now I'm not saying that it's right or wrong or good or bad that people do this, but people look up to people that are capable of entering an arena with a ton of people that viciously disagree with you, and then being able to have like this sort of like bro-ish alpha male, whatever, like back and forth conversation with these types of people. And I do think it's garnered me a lot of respect in certain areas of the internet that has let people listen to my content that wouldn't be the type of people that would like open a ContraPoints video and watch for more than 2 seconds because they're scared of like a trans person, you know?
Is there, I mean, is changing minds, should changing minds even be a priority during those things? Or like, is that just not, because not what it's about at all?
I mean, I usually, the thing that I say is the 40-40-20 thing, where like there are going to be people on both sides that are so dug in. I can be as dumb as I want. The other person can be as dumb as they want, and no one will change their minds. But there are people in the middle that are kind of undecided. And these are usually the people that I look for. Like if I feel like I go on to somebody else's stream who's crazy and I feel like I have a really good showing, the top voted comments are all going to be shitting on me. But if you go down a little bit, you'll start to find like upvoted comments that are like, hey, like normally I'm a big fan of your stream, but I don't think this was your best showing. Or I'll check like Reddit threads or subreddit threads about a lot of these things. And people are like, hey, I feel like, especially for Dick Masterson, I feel like Dick is a really smart guy, blah, blah, blah. But this was a really bad showing for him. I don't think he did well. And usually those are the types of people that I'm kind of like looking to move over, just kind of like showing like, hey, this person isn't as infallible as you think they are.
Is the format, so I'm sure, as you know, some of these things, like there will be 4 hour streams where it just goes
Mm-hmm.
on and on and on.
Or 6 hour, yeah.
Or 6 hour. I mean, yeah, 6 hour. I don't even watch on 2x speed. But so there's this common feedback that I get from people, because sometimes I'll be invited onto these things and people will write in and they'll say, David, it's like, I get the point of engaging with people who disagree and the topic is sort of interesting, but when something is 4 hours, like there's no way to sort of succinctly take anything away from it. Just
Mm-hmm.
what I remember is people talked for a long time. Some people talked louder than others. Some people talked more quickly than others. But like ultimately, my takeaways are just that the conversation took place, and that's where I wonder, like, is that even a format where we talk about on cable news, you get 4 minutes to talk about something, and like obviously that's a ridiculous format to
Mm-hmm.
talk in depth about anything. But on the other hand, is 3, 2, 3, 4, 5 hours on a single topic, is that a format that also really communicates information of value to the audience? I just don't know.
I mean, it has an audience, right? There are people that watch it. And the way that I view a lot of this stuff is, at the end of the day, like there are people that are going to tune into these types of things. If I can present like a left-leaning perspective, or I should say like a progressive a progressive perspective on these types of shows, and I think I'm equipped well to do it, then yeah, for sure, I would love to be involved in that. Because otherwise these things just end up being screaming matches between a bunch of alt-writers, and everybody kind of like laughs about it, and they have all their memes and everything, but you don't really get like a progressive point of view ever presented in an effective manner. So I mean, like there's a special type of viewer that watches these long-term things. Like these aren't the types of people, I mean, you even know this, right? So like for instance, like the type of person that watches like a YouTube video isn't the same type of person to watch a live stream. So like you can have people with a lot of YouTube subs that don't really get quite as many viewers on live streams, and you can have people with a lot of live stream viewers that don't get quite as many YouTube viewers, just because it's like a different type of audience. So I do think there is an audience that watches this long form content and consumes it a lot differently than people that like conventionally watch YouTube videos.
So let me bring up now, in these sort of trends of platforms and formats that we've been seeing, and
Mm-hmm.
everybody's going to know that I'm talking about Dave Rubin. So I'll just say, like, he's sort of he's on the vanguard of this format once again. And it's this,
What is this, standing up straight without a backbone, or sorry,
no,
I'm
well,
sorry.
yes, that may be part of it. But what I'm actually talking about is this idea of, I want to get ideas out into the ether. I'm not here to fight people on every assertion. It doesn't mean I agree with everything that they're saying, but I'm all about ideas and hearing about the ideas that people have. And what this has led to in practice is pretty fair criticisms of Rubin for allowing, quite frankly, unhinged right wingers to say things that are ridiculous, that are just they're just wrong, and they're demonstrably wrong by any standard of examination. But the argument is that the format is one where people just get to sort of give their perspective, and Dave wants to learn about their ideas. If I did that with Richard Spencer, like when I interviewed Richard Spencer, if I took that approach, my audience would not tolerate it. And I'm sort of interested in your perspective on, is that a legitimate perspective to take? Or is it just something that you've got to find a niche audience that's okay with that, but it's really not something that we learn much from?
I think it's totally legitimate to want to have all ideas expressed out there, but it already happens. They're called fucking libraries, or you can go on Wikipedia and you can read about them. This idea that you want all ideas to be heard, so you bring them onto a fucking internet radio show or whatever, is absolute bullshit. You're not just like platforming the ideas. You're working as their publicist or PR firm at that point. If I bring on some guy to talk about like history revisionism, who's a neo-Nazi, then at the end of the day, the consequence of that is there are going to be some people that listen to it and go, oh, this guy actually made a lot of really good points. I think I'm going to go and research more about this. And some of those people will inevitably be lost down that hole of kind of like alt-right propaganda. And this can be true of any idea of platforming, either like science deniers, climate change deniers, people that are extremely conservative, people that are extremely, religious. Not that these ideas are all like equally bad or equally good or whatever, but just that like when you platform an idea and you don't challenge it, then inevitably some percentage of your fan base is going to look into that idea more and then kind of be lost to it, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. So, I mean, like I would argue that we have a responsibility as public figures to platform things that kind of like align with our moral values. I have a set of morals that I believe in terms of what should people do in society, what people ought to do in society. And if I were to bring on like Nazi after Nazi after Nazi after like traditional conservatives, like not that these are the same. I keep trying to say that because I don't think like all conservatives are Nazis or whatever, but like basically people that I heavily disagree with politically or morally, all I'm doing is I'm exposing my fan base to their ideas so that they can, eventually kind of like flow over to that part of the internet and then be a part of that group. Why would I do that? It doesn't make any sense. It's stupid, right?
Yeah.
Dave Rubin is basically a prop for kind of like conservatives to spread their message. That's all he is. He's not platforming ideas. He's like a stage one recruitment platform for a lot of these conservatives online. That's what he does.
Why do you think he's doing it? Why do you think this is the format he's decided on? Because you could take the position that, I mean, listen, it's not for us to figure out the exact financial logistics of the show, but the case has been made that it's because he's not equipped to actually refute the ideas. The case has been made that it's because he agrees with the ideas. The case has been made that it's because of the people who fund his show and they're just funneling him these guests and implying go easy on them. Do you have any strong opinion on that?
So I think there's something called Hanlon's razor, and it's basically, it's never attribute to malice that which is adequately explained by stupidity. I don't like to assume that a person is an evil actor unless I have really good reason to think so. I honestly think Dave Rubin, like so many other useful idiots online, is just really, really fucking stupid. He doesn't deserve to be in this space. He's not equipped for it. He's completely uninformed. He doesn't have the intellectual rigor to take on any of these ideas. And I don't even mean that in a big way. I just mean like he's real dumb. He's real dumb. And yeah, I think he just ends up being like kind of like a useful idiot, like a puppet for a lot of those more kind of insidious conservative groups that are trying to spread their influence online. And I think that's kind of, I think that's where Dave Rubin sits at right now. That's what it feels like to me.
I feel like there is, and I'm curious what you think, there are elements on the left and the right that for me sometimes get a little bit too much in the direction of suppressing reasonable conversations. And by reasonable, I don't mean conversations with reasonable people, but I mean conversations where bad ideas are actually going to be challenged in a serious way. And the example that I have been thinking about for a while is when I interviewed Richard Spencer like a year and a half ago or something like that. I knew what his ideas were. I find his ideas disgusting and deplorable. He knew that. There was no sort of pretense that this was, let's figure out what white nationalists think. We sort of know what they think and we're going to challenge these ideas. And after the interview, obviously there were people on the right who didn't like it, but there were people on the left who wrote to me who said, this is just a really bad idea to even give someone like Richard Spencer airtime. And I went back and I did a YouTube search, Richard Spencer interview. And like within 2 weeks of when I talked to him, RT had interviewed him, CNN had interviewed him, and they were relatively milquetoast interviews where his ideas were not seriously challenged. And to me, it's like, Is the problem that he's getting airtime, or is the problem that he's getting airtime on corporate media or media where he's not being challenged? And I feel like the left, the right, I don't even try to argue with the right on this, but I feel like the left needs to not make this mistake.
I 100 million% agree. I think we did it for a long time in the United States, especially like kind of seeing what happened with Trump, where like the airtime with Trump was basically just like, LOL, look at how dumb he is. Like, oh my God, Trump is so dumb, right? And everybody liberal outlets just kind of like aired it over and over again, like, oh my God, look at this dumb thing that Trump said. And then the election rolled around. It's like, oh shit, like I guess these people don't all think Trump is really dumb. Like, oh fuck, maybe we should have actually addressed some of the things that he said, because they are worth addressing, you know? I mean, like you kind of see this like boil down into Hillary's, Trump is like, make America great again. And Hillary's like, America's already great. It's like, okay, well, not everybody feels that way. And at some point, you're going to have to address that, whether you want to or not. Like you have to address some of these issues because people on the right are doing it and people on the left aren't, like today in the progressive movement, we push a lot of minority figures, black people, women and whatnot to the front of media to feel like they have voices and representation, which is great. And I think we should absolutely do that. And I love that we're seeing that more. But for some reason, we've kind of got this idea where we leave a lot of white people feeling vilified. Now, I'm not going to sit here and make the ludicrous argument that like the white man is the most persecuted, blah, 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 or any stupid shit like that.
Right.
However, there are a lot of people that feel that way. And when you look at the left, well, okay, well, let's say I'm kind of like I want to be like a woke white dude. Like, who do I look at on the left, and you don't really have very many people to look to. And then you go to the right and you have these incredibly persuasive rhetoricians, the people like Jordan Peterson. Then it's like, oh, well, shit, like there's only one place to go. Jordan Peterson is giving me like a lot of advice. He's giving me like reasonable ways to view my life, because a lot of his self-help stuff is actually good, whether or not lefties want to admit it. And then there's none of that on the left. And it's like, well, fuck, like you're losing the rhetoric battle. And at the end of the day, that's really all that matters. You can be as right as you want, but if you're not persuasive, nobody's going to care what you have to say.
Are you familiar with this Christian financial dude, Dave Ramsey?
No. What does he do?
Okay,
I feel like I've heard that name before.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, the reason I bring him up is I think that there is a significant similarity between Christian financial dude Dave Ramsey and Jordan Peterson, and it's this similarity.
Mm-hmm.
The things Jordan Peterson is saying that are, as you say, sort of like reasonable, sensible advice for most people if applied responsibly, are not unique or new to Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson didn't come up with them. He sort of repackaged them in a way that comes along with a whole bunch of other stuff that is problematic. Dave Ramsey, 75 to 80% of his financial advice is uncontroversial. It's been around for like 100 years if you go back and read 1920s basic financial advice, but he repackages it along with this sort of born again evangelical stuff and connects it in that way. And what happens with Peterson is a lot of the people that fall for Peterson, they see the sensible stuff and then they believe that his worldview is like inextricably tied in to that simple basic advice.
Yes.
And so then they fall for the worldview. Similarly, with Dave Ramsey, you see people, he's like, listen, you got to pay off the debt that has the highest interest rate first. If you don't have 6 months of expenses saved, that's an emergency and you've got to deal with that. And by the way, when you pay off your debt, you do this primal scream that's similar to like when a Christian person is born again and it gets all tied in. And that's why these guys are so dangerous, because their sort of articulate nature and a presentation wraps together the uncontroversial stuff with the worldview.
Yeah, and anybody that tells a lot of lies knows that this is like true as well. Like if you want to tell a really good lie, you always have to ground it out in something that's true. You always have to start with something that the other person knows is true, because then when you go on to tell the lie, if they know that part of what you said is true, it becomes really hard to separate like the fact from the fiction later on, And people do this thing where they get outside of they kind of get outside of what they know for a variety of reasons. This is one of my big criticisms actually, like Jordan Peterson, right? Where I think that Jordan Peterson is qualified to talk about self-help stuff. I really do, because when I watch videos, people do this all the time. They link videos like, look at this stupid Jordan Peterson video about this thing, and I'll click it and it's like a self-help thing. I'm actually thinking like, this is actually like pretty good. This is actually like really on point. Like I actually really agree with this. But then people like Jordan Peterson, I guess because they get really good in one area, think like, oh well, since I can do this, I'm gonna go and talk about like philosophy or history or politics. And it's like, oh God, stop. But all the people that followed him along for the first thing because they thought it was good was like, oh well, if he knew that, he must know literally every single other topic, right? And people do this with Elon Musk, people do this with Neil deGrasse Tyson, people do this with all sorts of people. They're the Bill Nye the Science Guy, right? Like, yeah, it's a really bad thing, but it happens. Yeah.
The big con for me with Peterson is not that he has repackaged basic advice that's been around for a long time and is profiting from it. It's actually that there are people who sort of fall for the sort of more grandiose theories that he presents about the real problem in modern society is this neo-Marxist, postmodern, egalitarian obsession that the far left has become entangled with, that they can't seem to get away from, or whatever else. And that for me is like really the big con that he's waged and has convinced people with, because it's much easier just to take like the piece of self-help advice and say, oh yeah, that
Mm-hmm.
applies to me or that doesn't apply to me. And it's like much more clear cut whether it's something that is relevant for you. But then when you
Mm-hmm.
see that that stuff is charismatic, as you point out, then you say, hey, you know, maybe the problem is these radical leftists at universities and the suppression of speech or whatever. It's way harder to reason yourself out of that stuff when you're in it.
Yeah, and like people on the left always, well, I no, it's not people on the left. Everybody does this. People always want to see people as wholly good or wholly bad, and it's just not true. And I try to stress this all the time. Like I never make or I try not to make like the clean your room jokes about like Jordan Peterson, because that advice and everything he talks about there is actually really good. And one of the problems that you run into is that when people on the other side start falling for some of that rhetoric, and then you on the left sit there and say, well, everything about that is untrue. Well, it's like, well, hold on. You're basically, do you know what DARE is?
Like the drug drug
Yeah.
abuse resistance education. Yeah.
Yeah, like it's probably not a good idea to smoke marijuana every single fucking day. That's probably really bad. But if you're telling me that if I smoke marijuana, my dick is going to shrivel up and fall off, I'm probably not going to listen to anything that you have to say.
Right.
You know, like you can actually say things like, hey, Jordan Peterson offers a lot of good self-help advice, but his politics are really bad. There's nothing wrong with that statement. And people on the left always feel like they have to brush off, or no, I'm sorry, people on both sides, but we're talking about the left right now, right? We'll always brush off every single thing that somebody has to say. Like there's no valid criticism in there whatsoever, you know? Like I'm not a Marxist, but I think that there are valid criticisms that Marx levies against capitalism. I
Sure.
don't believe in the red pill at all, but there are a lot of really valid things that red pillars bring up that you have to be prepared to address. And this writing off an entire ideology wholesale is only going to drive people away that do see the nuggets of truth that those ideologies are offering.
Do you, what do you see as the shelf life of Peterson? Because this could be a guy who, until he's in his 80s, is in demand as a speaker and continues writing these books that are bestsellers in 30, 40 languages or whatever. Or maybe he just sort of like evaporates in 5 years, and I don't know which way it's going to go.
I mean, it all depends on if he has like social issues that he can kind of like hinge himself on. Um, I guess like because when you look at a lot of people like to pretend that Jordan Peterson got famous for doing self-help stuff, but if you go back and you look at like his YouTube analytics, for instance,
Yeah.
you see a massive uptick when that C16 stuff happened. Like that's when he first started to really get popular.
Yep.
You know, so as long as there are these issues that he can kind of like hook himself onto and to kind of like remain relevant to talk about, he'll probably continue to be popular. That would be my guess. But I mean, it's hard for me to predict exactly what'll happen. You know,
Yeah,
like
I
nobody
don't
could have
think anyone
predicted
knows.
like Milo's downfall would have been as extreme as it was, to go from literally being on like, you know, Showtime with Bill Maher and stuff, and then to like having the pedophile stuff come out, and now he's like he can't like fill an audience in like an auditorium, you know?
Yeah, just another speaking tour, I guess, just got canceled again or something. I
Yeah.
just read. I paid very little attention to that, but I did see that that article. Okay,
Mhm.
so let's get into the ad boycott stuff now, which is, I feel like from our last conversation, this was the most serious disagreement we had, which was that I think, in short, I sort of defended lobbying advertisers to pull advertising from shows as a kind of legitimate method of political activism. And I think generally speaking, what you didn't say that it should be illegal or anything like that, but you were just against it as a pragmatic point of view.
I guess like I'm in favor of it, but for only the reasons I agree with and not
Hmm.
for yeah. So I mean it's kind of one of those things. It's kind of like guys like, do you think you should be allowed to kill people? And it's like, well, if I think it's justified, right, you should, like in self-defense or whatever. And somebody else might agree as well, but they might say for like, well, apostasy or something, you know, like that. And it's like, well, I don't agree with that. So like, yeah, I mean, like, I guess it's more kind of like the more fundamental question is like, who should have ads pulled from them? Because like, for instance, and unless you're talking about like an extreme free speech person, an
Yeah.
extreme free speech advocate, I don't think anybody should say like, oh, well, if you want to come on and literally do an entire show dedicated to the supremacy of white people, you have a right to have like advertisers sponsor your program. Unless, would you take that position? I'm not trying to like get you here or
Well, I
anything.
mean, I don't know that it's here's the thing. I don't know that it's a
Mhm.
question of rights. For me, this is the fundamental issue.
Sure.
When it comes to, if we're talking about the speech of those who are hosting the show
Mhm.
versus advertising decisions are also a form of speech, and anything that the advertiser wants to take into consideration when deciding where they want to advertise, they're obviously free to do. And then the speech of the activist who wants to contact MetLife or whatever company and lobby them to make a decision one way or the other on the basis that they would boycott that company if that company keeps advertising somewhere. I don't want to restrict anybody's speech, presuming that it's not against the law. So that's like my starting point. So I feel like any activism that I do against ad boycott demands, other than saying I don't think they're effective, or I'll get to what some of my problems are with them. I don't want to kind of get ahead of myself. Anything that is sort of at top level saying this is a type of speech that I don't think people should exercise, I hesitate to make that argument.
Okay. I guess so. This is something that I would have agreed with a while ago, but my position on kind of like deplatforming has evolved quite a bit
Okay.
over the past like year and a half. I hate bad faith actors or people that engage with gross negligence in public discourse. And I think all of these people should be aggressively removed from any type of public platform. I don't think they serve any good whatsoever.
Okay.
And I think all they do is dilute the conversations and cause people to get like, I think that these people are actually, they represent a fundamental attack against some of our fundamental structures that make democracy work.
But
like,
so what's
these
an
are the,
example?
Yeah,
What's an example of one of these, just so everybody knows like the type of thing you're talking about?
Sure. So when you engage in either totally factually incorrect information or grossly negligent of information. So here's like, we could do a ton of examples, but like here's like a very easy one. Do you know who Sargon of Akkad is, right? I'm assuming, or no?
Yes, I know him as Carl Benjamin.
Carl Benjamin. Okay, you call him Carl. Instead of Sargon of Akkad. Okay, so like Carl does this thing a lot where he brings up studies or he makes like these comments about people or things or places that have happened, but these things either don't happen the way that he says they do, or he's just completely and totally wrong.
Okay.
One of the clearest examples I can think of is there was a journalist lady that wrote an article about council housing. Have you heard of this?
No.
Yeah, but basically he said something along the lines of like, of course this journalist comes out in favor of council housing. She's never seen one before. And then like, and people, I think Sean and Jen did a YouTube video on this. It's like, well, actually, she's literally lived in them. And if you would have just clicked the Twitter profile on her thing, you would have seen that she's lived in them before. And then Carl came out and made another video. He's like, oh, well, she probably never lived in any of the bad ones, like any of the ones in some place. And like Sean and Jen was like, well, actually, this is almost exactly like where she said she's been at, or something like that. And it was like really bad. It was really obvious that Carl was like totally wrong on everything he was saying. And these people that like make these statements that are just factually incorrect, it's like we can't have conversations. Our democracy dies if we literally can't have conversations that are rooted in like fact-based conversations. Or like Trump, when Trump like just blatantly lies about something, when he says things like 3 million people illegally voted in the last election. It's like,
sure.
Wait, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, this isn't even like a disagreement. You're just like, this is just factually not true. Like,
okay,
how are we supposed to exist here?
But for the purposes of our conversation, so okay, Carl Benjamin just has bad faith argument or totally ignorant argument where he repeatedly asserts things that aren't true. Okay.
That just, yeah.
How does that relate to, so how you say he doesn't even deserve to have a platform. How should his platform be removed?
I mean, like, I think people should actively try to boycott it, or private companies should like have like rules against like these sorts of like bad faith actors where they're just like, oh, we're not going to host you if you literally just serve to spread misinformation here.
Okay, but hold on, because now I'm trying to follow that. So you could have terms of service, obviously, but producing content in bad faith is one that I don't call something a slippery slope unless I actually think there is one. I think we've got to be careful. That's a pretty slippery slope to say you can't do gore, crimes, or bad faith arguments. I just don't know from a practical perspective how you enforce something like that.
Yeah, and this is kind of like, I don't want to say that this is like, so there's something called the nirvana fallacy. So let's say, for instance, like we're on a boat, we're on a ship that's sinking into the ocean, and I'm like, hey, we should jump in one of the lifeboats and sail away. And so we're like, well, hold on, right? We don't know if this lifeboat is going to hold us. We don't know what the capacity is. It could have a hole in it. We haven't checked. And it's like, okay, well, hold on. Like the ship that we're sinking on right now is fucking sinking. Like this is not working. We can nitpick every single like alternative that I give, but the reality is that what we're on right now is absolutely failing. Like you can't tell me that unless I present you a perfect alternative that we can't even consider it, And I'm not saying you're doing that exactly, but like a lot of people, when I bring up my stance on deplatforming, they'll say like, hey, well, couldn't this be a slippery slope? Couldn't there be problems with implementing this? How do we know that this is working? And yeah, for sure, a lot of this would be really difficult to implement. But in my opinion, the reality is that right now, our inability to have fact-based conversations is literally destroying our democracy. Like, I don't think we can continue on like this for very much longer if we literally are believing in things like fucking QAnon or like Pizzagate. I don't think that we can actually have an established working democracy, because like being able to get information that's true, though, there's like one of our like fundamental institutions. We have to be able to do this. So
Yeah.
I think it's worth shaking things
I
up to
mean,
try it.
I don't disagree with the concerns that you're outlining, but to step back for a second from the good faith thing, you mentioned two things that should happen
Yeah.
to Carl Benjamin. You talked about the platform should decide you can't do this bad faith stuff on our platform. But then you actually said that there should be a boycott of Sargon of Akkad, which from our last conversation, I thought you had said that you were against advertiser boycotts. Do you mean people should just boycott his channel as viewers rather than going after advertisers?
Well, I would have to remember exactly. I don't like the idea where it depends on the subject material being boycotted. So,
Okay.
for instance, like I don't believe I just hate bad faith actors. I'm not as concerned with like hate speech, even though that can lead to bad outcomes. But like if somebody wants to get online and do like a KKK channel or like a whatever shit like that, I don't think that they should necessarily be boycotted or ads should be pulled or whatever. Blah blah blah. I just want to get rid of the bad faith actors. Like if somebody wants to get online and make like a Richard Spencer type wants to talk about like how white people are superior to black people, that's fine. We can have that conversation. You can have a channel or whatever.
Well,
Just
he
don't
does.
tell
And in fact, I
yeah.
caught like 30 seconds of a stream of his. Like he actually has that. He has the Richard Spencer show now, and that's what he does. And what is it monetized? I would guess it's not. But I don't. Again, if he knows how to toe the line between actually advocating violence and not, and I think we just need to make sure, as the anti-authoritarian free speech left that I consider myself a member of, I want to make sure that if I am actually telling a private company that I want them to restrict the speech of someone, that same rule applied across the board is not going to have unintended consequences.
Yeah, well, yeah, I agree. You just described real utilitarianism, which is exactly what I am. But so I 100% agree that we shouldn't like craft a rule that could basically be utilized in a way in the future that we wouldn't want it to be. But I mean, like, I hope to never be a bad faith actor. Like, I try my best to do my research. If I'm talking to somebody that seems way more informed on a topic than I am, I usually like, I'll let them talk. I'm not going to sit here and like make stuff up or try to lie to get a point across.
Sure.
So, I mean, I would hope that like any rule that I craft that says like a bad faith actor or somebody that engages in gross negligence and doesn't do anything to like prevent this, I don't think I would ever fall under that. I would hope not to fall under a rule that would like cut me down there. Yeah.
So to expand on my position from last time we talked, because again, we figured out that we apparently had a disagreement on this in like the last 5 minutes that we were talking. One of my principles is any restriction on boycotts of any kind, and this implies not only boycotting advertisers, but boycotting the program. Any restrictions on those boycotts, I see as restrictions on speech, and so I'm against them sort of on principle. But that's a different thing than saying that boycotts may or may not be a good strategy. And one of the things that concerns me about advertiser boycotts is that this is sort of the best argument that I've come across in trying to steelman an anti-advertiser boycott position. Do we really want advertisers having more power to decide what topics are covered and how they're covered in media? Because if you go after an advertiser for advertising on a program that has a particular position on any issue, pick the issue, right? Abortion, gay marriage, education, whatever. As soon as the advertiser starts getting involved in the minutia of we're going to pull our money because the host took this point of view or whatever, the advertiser effectively gets even more power. And I think that huge corporations already have a ton of power. So that's my, like, the best argument for me against ad boycotts is that it puts editorial control into the hands of advertisers. And that's a real problem.
You're killing me. I'm a big capitalist, okay? Let me preface that. I hate lefties, okay? But what you're talking about is basically you're just critiquing capitalism at this point. Like you're saying, like, do we want advertisers? God damn it. I hate making all these lefty arguments because now my But basically, what you're saying already happens, right? Advertisers already decide whose platform. Like
And that's a
the
problem.
major media, the major media organizations are already controlled by massive conglomerates.
Correct.
Elections are already decided by wealthy people and lobbyists. Large companies already decide like what type of like speech we see and what gets platformed or whatever. Like it already happens. So I mean, it seems like people pressuring advertisers is at least in some way taking the decision from the advertisers and giving it back to the people. In some ways, right? You vote with your wallet. Like
But that's the argument I was making last time, which you were disagreeing with. It sounds like you have had sort of a to not to make you the next Dave Rubin, but it sounds like you've had a political awakening on this issue of sorts.
I don't remember how long ago we talked last time, but
Well, it was
it's
15
possible.
years. You can't, no.
Well, oh, no, because I've actually 180'd on this position completely.
Interesting.
If you would have talked to me, I know 2 years ago, I was an extreme anti-deplatformer. Like I thought every speech should be hosted,
Yep.
everything should be online, no boycott should happen, all this stuff should be. That was my position. I 180'd 100% on this position. So it's possible that if you talked to me back then, that my position right now is quite different. Yeah, I absolutely think that bad faith actors should be eradicated from the internet with no violent connotation from that. Like they don't serve the public discourse in any way, size, shape, or form. It's just so horrible. Like they just do nothing good for us.
One of the strongest arguments that I see in supporting advertiser boycotts, and in a second I'm going to talk about people who say, "But David, you could be hurt by this," and what happens as soon as people start boycotting you? And I'll talk about that in a second. In our society, this is kind of like a critique of capitalism. And again, I'm a social democrat, right? I'm not a democratic socialist or a Stalinist or a communist or anything. I want regulated capitalism. Individuals have very little power to fight back against the sort of combined power of big media, corporations, and the political system.
Yeah.
Boycotts can potentially be a tool to do that. The average person has very little say over whether Tucker Carlson keeps his show on Fox News. The average person has very little say over the regulatory environment that allowed Fox News and CNN and MSNBC to get so big and the media consolidation that has taken place. The advertiser boycott is a slightly indirect way of actually at least attempting to get back some of the power that individuals have lost over the last 40, 50 years relative to huge corporations and media conglomerates. And for me, that's like the strongest reason to be completely in favor of advertiser boycotts.
Sure, a little bit, yeah. I don't like, in a way, this kind of segues into a totally different conversation. Because, for instance, let's say that all of our media was like not necessarily state run, but state funded. Our positions on this might be a lot different, right? If all of media wasn't for profit, like entertainment driven, like metric driven, what gets us the most viewers, what's the most entertaining shit, we might have different positions on this. So it's hard to have those two conversations separately. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I do understand what you're saying. But I think that when you consider, I mean, listen, let's take a step back for a second. If we were just to say, what are the ways in which an individual can most effectively exercise their desires in American society, right? We can say, well, okay, you go and you vote. And then you realize, well, you can vote, but the legislative desires of corporations and of rich people are way more likely to actually be made into the law than those of just middle class Joe or whatever. There's an interesting Princeton study on this that demonstrates this. So then it's like, well, maybe voting is actually not really the equalizer that some might hope it to be. So my point is, when the rubber meets the road, what are the most effective ways for the individual to impact the society in which they live?
I mean, violent revolution is what all the lefties would say, and I don't know if they're wrong.
But I mean,
don't ask me this question. I don't know.
It is
I mean, like,
interesting, though. I mean, it's interesting because you could disagree with my framing, but instead of disagreeing with my framing, you're sort of saying, "Man, I'm kind of like where my mind is going is the so-called radical left perspective."
No, I mean, I don't disagree with your framing at all. I mean, I 100% agree. I mean, like the federal government has enough information to file your taxes for us if you're a simple W-2 owner. If you just earn W-2 income, the federal government can do it, right?
Yes,
There's no reason why they can't.
Sure.
But there are riders on legislation that Republicans have passed because they get lobbied by Intuit to make it so that the federal government, the IRS, is not allowed to actually do that. It is against the law for them to automatically file your tax form. I don't remember voting for that. Sure. I don't think anybody voted for that. I don't think anybody would vote for that. So there's a lot of stuff that gets kind of like passed through legislatively that we don't directly have our hands in, which is in a way the consequence of a representative democracy. I understand, but the problem isn't so much that we're not being represented, or the problem isn't that we're not directly voting on every single piece of legislation. The problem is, who are the constituents of the people in Congress? And I mean, kind of what we're getting at, it doesn't feel like your constituents are the people in your districts. It kind of feels like it's the people that are giving you money to win your elections, which is not oftentimes like the average person that's being represented,
Yeah. I mean, we're sort of getting to, I mean, it's like, this is just such a broader thing. But as we've been talking about on my program for a while, when you talk about representative democracy, the idea would be that, you know, a member of Congress that represents, it's like 700 and something thousand people that are in their congressional district, that their votes would reflect not what other elected officials in Washington say is going to be our platform. I mean, really, they would represent the views of the 700 and something thousand people that put them there.
Hmm.
But we simply know that that's not the case, and that's a much bigger issue that we have to deal with. It's not really a representative democracy. It's a democracy that is representative of moneyed corporate and wealthy interests. And I can't imagine you and I would disagree about that.
I don't know if anybody could disagree about that, right?
Yeah, I guess the
We
question is whether we're better off with that system versus, you know, I mean, when you go back to Socrates, Socrates was not like the biggest fan of totally representative democracy, sort of for the similar reasons that we're kind of alluding to here, which is the masses don't necessarily make the best decisions, but this is kind of like a broader. I mean, I don't even know if that we want to go down this path necessarily.
I mean, I like representative democracy for a few reasons. Actually, I think representative democracy is way better than direct democracy. You can't expect every citizen to be totally up to date on every piece of legislation. It's just not realistic.
Correct.
You run into issues where sometimes it's better for political processes to move a little bit more slowly. For instance, could you imagine leaving the future of your country and its place maybe in like a large trading body up to the average citizen to vote on? That could end catastrophically, maybe.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So things like Brexit, for instance. So like I'm okay with the idea of a representative democracy. I just think the problem is like the representative democracy isn't representing the constituents and the actual districts, the people. It's representing the people that pay the money to win their elections. And some sort of election reform there is probably like really important to make it so that that doesn't happen.
So you mentioned revolution, and we don't have to talk about revolution, but let's actually talk about some. So we've talked before on my program about sort of like, okay, you
Hmm.
can sign petitions online, and those probably do nothing other than maybe raising some awareness about
Or
what's
getting like
going
a
on.
funny response from somebody in the White House or something. Yeah.
Yeah, you can go and vote, and of course, voting creates change in an indirect way that's
Hmm.
also relatively slow. So, like, if you look at what are some other sort of violent revolution, what are some other protest methods that activists can do? And you often hear civil disobedience, strategic loan defaults. Everybody stops paying their mortgages. It completely shuts down, you know, the financial system in a way that Congress has to intervene, and maybe you get something out of that. We talk
Ooh, that's
about
really interesting. I haven't heard that idea before. Maybe
yeah,
everybody defaults on their student loan or something. Yeah.
yeah. The idea of that is that if enough people act together, you
Hmm.
can shut down the financial system on which all of these industries and government rely. And that is a way to maybe get people's attention. But what I want to get to is we obviously can imagine how that would work at scale. But, you know, a million people signed up saying if X happens, we're going to rally. If Trump tries to fire Mueller or whatever. I mean, the Mueller report told us that Trump did try to fire Mueller, and Don McGahn said, I'm not going to do it. Nobody's
Hmm.
rallying, right? I mean, people are busy. You can't, you're not even sure, half the country can't meet an unexpected $400 expense. So what's it
Yeah.
actually going to take to get people to go and do mass rallies and stop working? I don't know what the answer is.
Well, as far as like stuff like that, this is my position on this is always, and this is totally, I'm sure like a sociologist, somebody could have a well more nuanced position. But my opinion on all of this is like until people are actually like starving or
Mm,
like facing the threat of not having a basic need met. So we could look at that like whatever Maslow's hierarchy of needs of like your fundamental, like if you don't have shelter, food, or clothing,
yeah.
that's what actually gets people out into the streets to start like rioting and shit. I don't think it's gonna be like President Trump tweets out the 400th ridiculous dumb shit thing or fires like the next like FBI director or something. I don't think that's actually going to get people out in the streets like in mass like rioting. I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah, and this is why I think still that the most likely scenario is Trump just kind of gets reelected with relatively little controversy in 2020. And I don't know where you are on that.
I don't whether or not Trump gets reelected. I would have to check out. Isn't he not doing as well like in the popularity polls? Like even the Mueller report stuff didn't like vindicate him as much as he wished it would. I don't
Yeah,
think
I
he
mean,
was.
here's the thing.
Mhm.
He's got like a high 30s approval rating, and a new poll says 55% of the country won't vote for him. But you can
Mhm.
easily win with those numbers because half the country doesn't vote, and we have an electoral college system.
Well, I mean, I'm hoping that the people doing those polls are projecting these to like voting populations, right? That like
Yes.
the yeah. Whether or not Trump gets reelected, I think is largely going to depend on how the Democrat stuff pans out. I have like intentionally not followed much because there are like 50 people like looking for book deals right now that are all running as Democrats. So
Yeah.
when we get a little bit closer to the debate session, I'll start like tearing into the candidates more. I heard that Biden is running. I don't know how I feel
Yes. Well, he
about
is.
I hope that the DNC like is a little bit more cognizant of their progressive base and of like the very mobilely active people, actively mobile people that
Yeah.
like want to get out and protest and be excited, kind of like Bernie's audience was, kind of like Trump's audience was. And I hope I don't know, man. I really shouldn't say anything. This is irresponsible because I haven't looked in as much. But the idea of like Biden being like the Democratic frontrunner is very fucking scary to me, and
Yeah.
it feels very much like a repeat of what we just did with Hillary. I
It
hope that.
does. It does. And
Yeah.
on the
Oh
political
God.
spectrum, they're similar. Biden's significantly older. He's also male.
Hmm.
I mean, I've said, some people have been writing to me angrily saying I'm pro Biden. I'm not pro Biden. I'm pointing out that he's been doing well in the polls since before he was running, and he raised a bunch of money on his first day. And I think he's generally a good debater, but I think it's a bad idea to go to what is effectively Hillary Clinton 2.0. Is
Yeah.
there anybody else that, and if you just don't, if you're not following it, that's totally fine.
Hmm.
Is there anybody else you particularly don't like who's running?
That I particularly don't like. For not for good reasons. No, I don't. No. I'm still kind of like I'm in the Bernie camp right now. I think, although Bernie fans are fanatic. Holy shit. Although maybe that's a good thing. I mean, Trump fans were fanatic. Yeah, but Bernie fans are crazy. But I still generally like Bernie, even though he has a lot of positions that I think are really stupid, or a couple that I think are really dumb.
Huh?
I think
Like
for the
what?
most like he's like anti-nuclear power, which
Oh,
yeah, I don't like that. He seems to be like very protectionist, which I think is very naive. So, for instance, he's not a big fan of things like NAFTA or the TPP, and I think there are problems there. I don't think that isolationist, overprotective thing works very well, like in this day and age. But for the most part, I like Bernie. Like a lot of his like domestic policies and the way that he would like kind of be more social in terms of like redistributing wealth and whatnot. I think are good. But yeah.
I feel like the problem with a lot of the way people talk about trade policy is
Hmm.
that it sort of assumes we're going back to the beginning before we have sort of like geopolitics and globalization. So you'll hear arguments that are sort of like flatly, here's why in rational actor classical economics, if you're starting from zero, tariffs are bad or tariffs are good or protectionism or whatever. And I feel like what's
Hmm.
lacking from all of these arguments is that these principles don't account for the fact that we've got like several hundred years of relationships and economic policy and decisions
Hmm.
that we are starting from, and you're not starting in a vacuum. And therefore, you sort of have to account for not what happens in an economics textbook when you apply a
Yeah.
certain policy, but what is the effect also considering geopolitical relationships. And like what I think this applies to both Trump and Bernie, that a lot of their analyses on trade miss that context.
Yeah, it's very populist. Like it's very like for the people driven. It's very easy for everybody to rally behind, and shit on the TPP like, "Oh, it's so bad. It gives all these protections to blah blah blah." And it's like, yeah, there were definitely problems with it, but if America just says, "Well, fuck this, I'm out." I mean, you basically lose all of that influence to China now, right? And a lot of our leverage in the TPP is now completely gone. A lot of that got removed because we completely left. And now, a key multilateral trade agreement that we could have used to lean into China more for things like copyright issues and stuff like that. Now we just totally gave all of that up, and all of that influence is lost to us and is gained by China, which is not good, right? Yeah, that's a whole other thing. But a lot of the international like trade related stuff is very fucking complicated. But people see something like the TPP and like, oh, it's bad. And it's like, okay. And then yeah, I don't know. Yeah, and I feel like Bernie does a lot of that stuff as well.
There's some basic like international relations stuff that I feel like we'd be very well served if people just kind of knew. And by people, I don't even mean just random people. I mean people who are involved in making decisions. Like if you just understand like structuralism, which argues that the most important factor in how countries are going to relate to each other
Hmm.
is sort of that kind of top level hierarchy and that relationship rather than the internal dynamics of whether a country is more or less socially liberal or whatever the case may be, that it's sort of the international structure of nation states that is most important. Like, liberalism, not in the context of progressivism, but just the idea that countries have priorities which they try to make effective through domestic policy. There's just like really basic stuff that, I mean, obviously Trump doesn't know it and none of us are surprised by that. But a lot of the
Yeah,
people that are on TV commenting about this stuff don't even know.
sure, maybe, yeah. I mean that's kind of you mentioned this earlier. That's kind of the consequence of our 4 minute like news bite cycles, right? We don't even have time to get into any of that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
If it's okay with you, I've been getting a bunch of super chats while we've been talking. Maybe we'll just see if there's any interesting ones and answer them.
Yeah, go for it. Usually when I'm on these shows and people have super chats, usually it's a bunch of people saying that I'm like a pedophile or something. So hopefully
Oh
yours are
God, no.
nice.
I think my audience is a little bit different here. Let me
Yeah, no, not
see.
good stuff. It's a
L-
big meme in my audience.
let's
People
see.
like, oh, here's a super chat for $10. Why are you talking to this manlet soy boy cuck Destiny? Shouldn't you be fucking his girl? Yeah, that's but yeah, go ahead. Sir.
Well, so here's a good one from Nate McBrady, who sent for $15. He says, "Could either of you gentlemen, which I already like the way it's starting, refine the distinction between controlled regulated capitalism versus uncontrolled regulate? I guess they mean uncontrolled unregulated capitalism. I mean, for me, the difference is it's the difference between the sort of Nordic economies and a libertarian free market utopia, which really doesn't even exist. I mean, that's how I would put 2 points on a spectrum to explain to people the difference between the two.
Okay. The big difference I would say is that like here are the two most important things. Okay, markets are real and they work, and you have to acknowledge the power of the market. But sometimes markets don't work, and when they
Right.
fail, you have to acknowledge when they don't work. So like for instance, if you want to make affordable housing happen in the United States, rent control is a real shit way to do it because markets are real and market forces are not going to allow something like rent control to ever work. However, if you want something like healthcare to work in the United States, you have to acknowledge that for a variety of reasons, there are market failures that exist in healthcare that's not going to work. That needs to be socialized, right? That's kind of my, in terms of like unfettered capitalism versus like, I guess like a sock dem approach to capitalism.
Yeah, and for everybody, there's a lot of I guess I would call them basement economists, or I don't know what term to use. Maybe that's a little bit pejorative, but
Hmm.
there's a lack of understanding of something called elasticity of demand. And sometimes it's not that the market doesn't work; it's that because the demand for something like healthcare is completely inelastic, you either have no demand for it whatsoever because you're not sick, and therefore, whether the sticker price for a knee replacement is $100 or $1,000 or $1,000,000, it has no effect on your demand. All of a sudden, you need a knee replacement or you need chemotherapy or whatever. And the price also has no effect on your demand because you damn well need that thing. And the fact that some of these markets have inelastic demand, it's just like basic economics, and it's completely missing from most serious discussions of where markets are. I would even use the term ethical, where there is an unethical market
Hmm.
given inelasticity of demand.
Yeah, and I mean like elasticity of demand is only like one. Like you've got geographic monopolies, like
Yep.
you've got different types of like rent-seeking behavior that have like favorable legislation that favors certain large companies. Like there's a whole bunch of different things that could be the reason why a market fails. And there's I mean you just need to recognize when these happen, and then you need to legislate accordingly. You've got externalities like pollution, for instance. That's not something you have to pay a price for unless the government makes you. So why wouldn't you pollute more than your neighboring, factory? Or there's like a million other
So let's see. Kiwi says Tonkazaw and Knobs would destroy both of you plebs. Do you know who those people are? I don't know who those people are.
Yeah, Tonka Saw is like an online wrestler, crazy dude, and then No Bullshit is a guy that is, honestly,
No
this guy is
bullshit.
like, yeah,
Knobs. Yeah, I didn't even realize.
the most inspirational story in America. Have you ever heard this guy talk before?
No.
Oh, he is astoundingly stupid, unimaginably stupid. He will make you question everything about what you think the average human is capable of when you listen to this guy talk. But he has over 600,000 YouTube subs and he's growing real fast. His growth is tremendous. It's insane. But yeah.
Should I check these people out or not?
I don't know. I mean, if you're like in a padded room and you don't feel suicidal at the moment, then maybe you can. But oh my God, otherwise, it's real hard listening to these people. It's
Fair.
astounding how horribly stupid. It's funny. Like conservatives always talk about like the. Are you familiar with the NPC meme?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, I'm like NPC number one if you check out some subreddits.
Okay, there you go. Yeah, but like conservatives are like the ones that do the same NPC talking points. Like, how many videos have to be made about Brie Larson like destroying superhero movies because Captain Marvel was a fucking woman? Or how many times do we have to hear about like SJWs ruining some franchise because they put like a black person? Like, I don't know. I feel like I hear the same talking points over and over again from conservatives that just have this crazy like anti-SJW bend, and
Yeah.
it's like how many? Yeah, ugh.
Let me see. Ecto Squid says, "Do you guys foresee an escalation in attacks from white nationalists? I think they feel desperate and time constrained about white replacement." I mean, listen. The last 2 years tell me, unless something changes, we're going to continue seeing an escalation in violence from white nationalists. There's a new ADL report, which I'm talking about on my show tomorrow, where anti-Semitic attacks, assaults rather, doubled from 2017 to 2018. And I wonder if we disagree on this. My view has been that Donald Trump did not create white supremacists. Donald Trump did not create white nationalists or anti-Semites. But as Richard Spencer personally told me, they see Trump as the closest thing that they've had in a long time to someone who will sort of just look the other way and not aggressively criticize them, and that's what's emboldened them. I don't know what your take is on that.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree. I've always said, like, Donald Trump is never the problem. He's like the symptom of a larger problem that has to be acknowledged. Getting rid of Donald Trump doesn't get rid of all the people that were looking for this type of leader to kind of show up. Yeah.
Pakman's P Girl has a question. Why did I post revenge porn of their dad? Which I'll deal with probably on a paid only. That's a little too crazy for what we're talking about here. Oh, there's some
wait, what? You can't just skim over that. Wait, is that a meme or did this happen?
No, I don't know what they're talking about, honestly, but I like to pretend that these are serious things I'll someday come clean about. Have you noticed the videos that Hack Tim Pool has made recently? I don't watch any Tim Pool stuff. Do you? I know him personally. Is this a guy you're familiar with?
Yeah, he's kind of like, I don't know. Like, imagine like David Rubin and Joe Rogan had like a kid that inherited some of the baldness and then all the bad ideas and lack of spine. That's like Tim Pool right now. Yeah.
So you don't really like his content, it sounds like.
Oh no, he's like the most absurd face sitting, like, or not face sitting, Christ, fence sitting, kind of like no position. What was the last dumb thing he tweeted? It was like yesterday, I think, even, where he has like the worst position. It's like if you were to go into a topic and you're like, what is not like what's a bad position or an okay position? What is the worst position I can take on something? It seems like that he somehow manages to do that. Oh man, can someone in my chat will know it? Like something that he just said, like literally yesterday.
Well, one thing I saw that he tweeted yesterday, which I responded to, was that Dave Rubin is right not to have Sam Cedar on, because if he did, Sam Cedar would do so poorly that the left would say, you had a weak leftist on. And I was like, that's a really, really, that just doesn't make any sense.
Unbelievably stupid. Imagine how lost you are to think Dave Rubin would win a debate against Sam Cedar. I can't even imagine. But actually, the Tim Pool thing was, it had to do with not platforming extremists or not like not bending to extremists, and he called progressives extremist.
Oh,
that was his like.
See, that's the thing. Like, okay, so my backstory with Tim Pool is I met him 4 years ago at a conference, and he was perfectly nice and said he found out about me when Westboro Baptist Church was hacked by Anonymous live on a show I did, and I said that's totally fine, and we sort of kept in touch a little bit. And beyond that, he's always been perfectly nice to me, but I'm aware that he claims to be on the left or some kind of centrist, but the few things I see him post to Facebook all seem to be attacks on the left.
Yeah, that's what they always do, man. They always say, like, it's like me going on my channel and being like, hey guys, just so you know, I'm cool with Jewish people, like they're fine or whatever. And now tonight we're gonna do my part 72 of my 800-part series on how the Holocaust maybe isn't really reported as accurately as it really was. And then like anytime somebody like pushes me, like, wait, dude, are you sure? Because you see, and it's like, dude, what do you mean? I'm just trying to steel man the argument for history revisionism about fucking the Holocaust. What's wrong, man? What's your problem? Yeah,
how dare anyone?
People do that dumb shit all the time. And it's, you know what the ironic thing is? Do you want to know what the super ironic thing is? Is they're virtue signaling. That's what they're doing. When they say things like, oh, well, I don't hate like, I'm actually really liberal in the United States. I just hate feminism, Black Lives Matter, and everything to do with the Democratic Party. And I don't think Trump is as bad as people make him out to be. But I am a liberal. It's like, dude, you're virtue signaling the word. Just
that's not a reasonable position. That sounds pretty reasonable to me, actually.
Wait.
You
were joking, right?
I'm kidding.
Oh God! Oh no! Okay.
Okay. So someone.
I've heard it so many times. It's not even a joke when you say it. I have to do a double take. Oh God.
There's somebody who a couple of times is asking that we touch on end-to-end encryption, and I don't really know anything about that. Like, is that something I can? Are you able to comment on end-to-end encryption, the coming reality of end-to-end encryption?
My guess is end-to-end encryption means that like a middleman can't like listen in the middle of a conversation and pick up what's going on either end. But those types of encryption technologies already exist, so I don't.
I guess this person is saying that it will make it infeasible to ban child porn and radicalizing content if there's actual end-to-end encryption. I just don't know enough about this to be able to comment, honestly.
Oh, what I think what the donator is trying to say is like, let's say we make it impossible for third parties to intercept our transmissions.
Yeah.
Do you think that's a good thing or a bad thing? Because if we do make it impossible for like the government or intelligence agencies to listen in on our conversations, can't people use that for bad, like spreading child porn? Is I think what he's saying.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I guess I would need to read up about that. Just not something, I have no problem saying that's not an area of expertise, and I'm the last person who should be commenting on that.
Uh-huh.
The Homer Pimpson wants to know if either of us would consider going on Joe Rogan. There's probably an interesting conversation there. I've said before I'd go on, and if I did, I would gladly tell Joe what I think is great about his show and what I think is not so great. And I've been in
Yeah.
touch with his producer, and he actually sent me a message the other day because we had like a copyright thing, and maybe we're going to make something happen soon. What's your sense? Do you think Joe Rogan is creating a platform for interesting conversation? Is he disproportionately platforming problematic people? Like, what's your view?
So I don't think Joe Rogan is an extreme conservative or anything like that. I think that Joe Rogan is probably legitimately like a center leaning kind of guy.
Hmm.
But this kind of circles back to our very beginning conversation on like responsible platforming. Regardless of your personal point of view, when you're bringing on like conservative after conservative after conservative, and you make them seem like reasonable, cool people that are just like down to earth, chill people, what's going to happen is some segment of your audience is invariably going to peel off and start following those people.
Yeah.
And he's done it to people like Jordan Peterson. He's done it to people like Alex Jones. Like there is only one issue. Like you can go on and give like legitimate, well, I say legitimate, but you can go on and talk about like how like maybe we should exterminate races of people. And as long as you say it in a friendly manner, like Joe Rogan will probably sit there and listen to you and maybe even agree with you a little bit at the end of the day. I'm being really extreme,
Yeah.
but like it seems to me there's only one issue. There's only one issue that Joe Rogan will fight to the death on, right? Like maybe black people, maybe we can make arguments for black people being exterminated. Maybe the Holocaust didn't really happen the way that it did. You know, maybe we should subjugate the working class to horrible conditions. Well, did you just say something bad about marijuana? We're going to spend the next hour of our show. You will never insult cannabis in my presence. And he'll actually go real hard on that issue.
Yeah.
But that's like the only thing that he'll actually defend to the death.
So,
Like,
I mean,
yeah.
yes, I think there's a couple other issues where I've seen him do pretty well is these sort of extreme cartoonish libertarian arguments that sometimes people make. And in fact, there's a Dave Rubin thing where Dave Rubin talks about like chickens and the postal service, and it's just an incredible implosion. And Joe Rogan just very carefully and calmly exposes it. On climate change, he's sometimes pretty good. When he had Candace Owens on, he
Mhm.
really made her look stupid on the issue of climate change. So yeah, I mean, I think it's not that he lacks the intellectual capacity to challenge any of the people that come on. I think sometimes he's just underinformed, and he even said that. Like after the first time he had Jack Dorsey on, and
Mhm.
people said, "Whoa, like you didn't talk about any of the serious stuff that should have been discussed." He actually said, "I was underprepared. I didn't properly prepare
Mhm.
for that." So for me, it seems just more of an issue of he's got a lot of interest and he's not super informed about all of the stuff he's interviewing people about.
Kind of, yeah. That and like I don't think, and I could be wrong here. If I'm wrong, correct me. But I don't think that Joe Rogan sees himself as like a journalist or media outlet, so he doesn't necessarily think he has that extreme responsibility to like the public discourse.
Yeah.
So yeah. So I just don't think he puts in like the rigor to actually do that because he doesn't see it as his responsibility. But I mean, unfortunately, that it seems like so many people seem to think that, and here we are, where all of these people end up platforming all of these conservatives or like these extreme conservatives over and over and over again without challenging them in as much as you'd want them to be challenged. Like I didn't watch the episode with him and Candace Owens. That's great if he challenged her on one issue, but like this is a person that should be destroyed for like 3 solid hours. Like she
Yeah.
has said so much horribly stupid shit that like yeah, but I didn't watch that whole episode, so I don't know how much he called her out on or not.
The progressive voice wants to know if you and I played 1v1 basketball, who would win? And I mean, let's maybe deal with that first. Do you play basketball?
How no.
You don't. And then how tall are you?
I'm 5'8".
Okay, I'm also 5'8". So actually, I mean, I'm kind of out of practice. So it may actually be a fight. Like, are you generally in pretty good shape?
I mean, I'm not like huge, but I wouldn't say I'm in pretty good shape. I can like keep up with my kid and run around with him, but I don't know. We'll set this up sometime,
All
okay?
right. Yep. It may be a fight next time I'm in LA. Also, ask Destiny about the Vegeta clip. He retweeted it, and I think it's Vegeta, right? Every time I pronounce it wrong, but it's mostly a goof.
Yeah, it happens.
But so, is there anything that you want to comment about that clip you retweeted? I don't even know what it is.
Oh, it basically there's like do you know what anime is?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Well, you say of course, but DBZ is one of the most popular animes, and you didn't seem to know much about it, David.
That's true. I don't
Um,
know anything about that.
Yeah, but it's like Saiyans are like a race in Dragon Ball Z, and Vegeta is like a Saiyan nationalist. He thinks that they're like the superior things or whatever. So yeah, that's just people were moving on you about that clip.
And lastly, I think a great note to end on is someone in non-super chat. I'm going out of super chat, even though I have no reason to, but I'm going to go out
Uh
of super chat for this. What do you guys think about white people? Which is a question on the vanguard of socio-political thought at this point in time. I don't even know how I answer a question like that.
Me neither. Jesse Peterson tried to get me on this one. Do you love black people? Oh, that was another thing that Tim Pool had tweeted. If you believe in white privilege, you are by definition a racist. I just remember that another dumb Tim Pool tweet, but yeah.
That's crazy. I've not seen that one, so I have to say, I have to make sure I say, if that's true, that's absolutely ridiculous. But I haven't seen that particular tweet.
Oh, sure. Just in case I sent it to you if you want to look at it. But yeah, he sent that like a week ago, but yeah.
Okay. Oh, and it popped up. Oh, and it popped up everywhere. Yeah, there you go. So
There you
there's the
go.
link if people want to see that. All right. So what else? I think that this has gone well. What else do we need to discuss? Is there anything else on the agenda that we should be mentioning?
Oh man, I usually just ask my chat what they think. I don't know if there's like any other major topic that we disagree on.
Where are you on Venezuela? I wonder if there's disagreement there.
Wait, about the coup that happened earlier today because I didn't read anything about it or what.
Well, just in general. I mean, do you have a strong view on the Maduro Chavez legacy?
I don't know. It seems pretty shit. I don't read as much about that. I usually follow like local stuff more than stuff going on in Venezuela. I know a little bit. The only research I did about Venezuela had to do with their economy because I know a lot of people point to issues with like, oh, that's why socialism doesn't work. So I was kind of curious like why their economy failed. So I know a little bit about like the nationalization of their oil industry and you know the overregulation problems that kind of like got them to where they are today. But in terms of following like the current regime or you know stuff going on with Trump and his relationship to that, I don't follow as much now.
So at least it's fair to say that you are not like one of these fans of Nicolas Maduro.
No, aren't there like a lot of I've seen reactions to this. Aren't there a lot of like lefty people that are kind of like championing him and saying, well, the US is only trying to kick him out because this is capitalism versus socialism again
Yeah.
or something like that.
Yeah.
And then some people are getting mad because they're kind of excusing what are probably human rights violations of this guy because he seems to represent leftism.
Yeah. I mean, so far your limited perspective matches up with mine, which gets
Sure,
me
yeah.
criticized on a lot of YouTube channels I've never heard of, but seem to
Yeah.
be very strong in their positions that I am very, very wrong on this issue.
Yeah, I
Um,
try not to. I try not to talk a lot because I kind of like I've seen some of it, but I haven't like dug in. I usually on a lot of these issues, it used to be that I would like give a take on something, and then I would get a million people emailing me with like history PhDs telling me why I was wrong. So I try to be really careful before I talk about an issue. So I would like read a little bit more about it to figure out like what the best position to take is. So I don't really comment much on it. Yeah.
That's perfectly fair, and I think it should be lauded to do that rather than saying, "How is it that Destiny is not commenting on this?" He's telling us he's not read up on it as much as
Yeah.
he wants to, and I think that that's great. It would be great if that happened on more shows. Can you imagine if during these like internet blood sports things, someone said, you know, in the middle of it, respectfully, I feel like I'm not as well read on that issue as I would like to be to comment, so I'm going to pass on that one. That's where the format falls short because you can't really do that in those 6-way, 4-hour
You
internet
know,
blood sports.
Ironically, it's actually one of my weakest points is because if somebody confronts me on something that I don't know, I'll say like, "Oh, I don't really know as much about this." Like I'll do that openly, but the people that I debate are never doing that. So it actually gives me the appearance of looking very weak when I do that.
Yeah.
Like some guy, like a guy will open up and talk a whole bunch of shit about some shit that he is totally fucking uninformed about without a problem in the world, and I'm not usually willing to do that. So sometimes it makes me look like I have the lower hand in a debate. Yeah.
All right. Well, listen, it's been a
Oh,
very interesting 70 minutes. Yeah, what's
wait.
up?
Okay, hold on. So we can talk more later about this. There is a Twitch show that is totally unrelated to politics, but sometimes I do politics just because I'm on it.
Yep.
And the guy's name is Trainwrecks. I don't know if that matters to you, but sometimes he hosts like really big political debates where he's able to surprisingly pull on people that are sometimes pretty big in terms of doing these debates. Would you be interested in joining me on one of these if I do this in the future, or I
Oh,
can
so
email you more
this would
information
be
about it?
like you and I versus him and someone else type of thing.
Not him and someone else, but two other people.
Oh,
And
okay.
potentially like really big name people coming up for the next one. Like I can show you, like you would be interested in these people. I don't know
Yeah,
if you'd be interested in the format, but yeah. Okay, yeah, I'll
I'm
talk with
super
you more about that.
interested. I mean,
Okay,
what do I
cool.
know what I've just gotten myself into, but why not?
Sure. Okay.
Um, okay. Oh, and did we want to talk about Sam Harris or not?
Yeah, if you want to go for
I
it.
mean, listen, I have no idea what your position is on Sam Harris, so I'll just like lay it out in 30
Uh-huh.
seconds and then you tell me whether it needs to be expanded.
Okay.
I think that Sam Harris's work on mindfulness and meditation is fantastic, and that's pretty uncontroversial. And I sort of consider him along the lines of John Kabat-Zinn there. And I think that that's just one side of him, which is how I originally knew him, which I find super interesting, and I think he's a great person to listen to. I think there are on political conclusions that he comes to a pretty broad range of sort of agreement and disagreement that I can encounter. I think his framing of some issues related to Islam, I agree with. I think he sometimes states factual, incontrovertible truths about the circumstances of world religion. And I think other times he either deliberately or sort of by exclusion gets people thinking some pretty horrible stuff. And I also have a real problem with the way that he handled the bell curve dude with relative kid gloves. I thought that that was maybe the worst thing that he had done, if I can think of it.
Did you listen to his conversation with, am I pronouncing it right, Ezra Klein about that?
I listened to part of it, and I remember Ezra making some pretty good points.
Yeah.
And it was pretty compelling.
Yeah, Sam. Oh man, Harris was not. The published emails that he thought would put him in a good light. He was horrible in that conversation. I have a lot of problems with Sam Harris, in that it's actually similar to Jordan Peterson, where sometimes he just talks about stuff that he just probably shouldn't be talking about. I don't know why he does. He gets into some like really weird Islamophobic territory sometimes.
Right.
And like the distinction I always make is like, I hate Islam and I hate Christianity, but I don't shit on like Muslims or Christians, right? Like you have to be able to draw a distinction here. Like, we can all hate religion together because, we have problems with theology, but that doesn't mean that all of the people are bad or that all the people that follow that religion are bad. And Sam gets caught up into these weird areas sometimes where like, he was like one of the four horsemen atheists. And sometimes I get this feeling that he's like defending Judeo-Christianity, and it's like really weird. And yeah, so yeah, I don't know. I have a lot of problems with Harris's politics. Seems like for the most part, he's typically left leaning, like progressive, but then sometimes he gets into these weird like fence sitting areas where he's like channeling like the Jedi spirit of Dave Rubin. And I don't know. I really don't like his politics sometimes.
Well, I mean, to go back to what you were saying before, do you feel that he is arguing in good faith?
Yeah, I really think he tries to. I just think he gets a little bit lost on some issues sometimes. I think the conversation between him and Ezra Klein is perfect. Where Klein is like very reasonably laying out the case for like, hey, this is why what you're doing is like really bad and kind of dumb. And Harris like totally can't see it. And I highly recommend everybody to watch that. That conversation is really good, I think.
All right, so it sounds like we're not like crazy far apart on the issue of Sam Harris.
Sure. I also hate his philosophy, and everything he has to do with philosophy is hilariously stupid. But that's another thing.
I haven't really read his philosophy stuff, but
okay. Basically, what he says is like bad stuff is bad because it's obviously bad, and good stuff is good because it's obviously good. That's his. Basically.
Oh, so this is like from the moral landscape, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah. I've only like thumbed through it a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, you've gotten about as much value out of it as you possibly could have. Yeah.
Maybe. So I'm not. I don't need to go back to it. You're saying?
No, you don't.
Well, listen, let me know about this 2 versus 2 debate thing, because it sounds interesting. Like, so when you've been on it before, what was like the lineup?
It was supposed to be Sargon of Akkad, and do you know who Stefan Molyneux is?
Yes, I do. He actually has attacked me a few times on my views on race and IQ, interestingly.
Yeah, he blocked me on Twitter. I hate that guy. But he ended up bailing out of the conversation. I don't know if it was. I'm gonna say it's because I was involved, because that guy's ducked out of me a lot in the past. But yeah, he ended up ducking out. So it ended up being at the last minute. It was Sargon of Akkad and a guy named Nick Fuentes, which in retrospect is probably not a good idea. But it was like an hour to go. Are you familiar with that kid at all?
I've actually heard about him, and wasn't he recently like caught doing something incredibly stupid?
Oh, are you thinking of Jacob Wohl?
No. I know Jacob Wohl. I know the difference between the two, but I thought that Nick Fuentes, or no, you know what? Some video came out recently of Nick Fuentes saying something horribly racist. It was like somewhat like a friend's video or something like that. I don't even remember now.
Oh, maybe. I tweeted a ton of shit like making fun of him for that. Because he's one of those people that tries to hide his like anti-Semitism behind like other words.
Yeah. It was an anti-Semitic thing. It was a video where it was something related to Jews. Yeah. Now that's actually.
Hey, maybe you might have actually saw my tweets, maybe. But he does like a lot of stuff like that. It was him. There are a couple dog whistles. I don't know if people are familiar with these, but here's a couple dog whistles of the alt-right. Yeah. One is people talking about like cookie factories, I guess, where people talking about like, hey, like I've got a friend and they said they baked like 6 million cookies, but if you look at like their house and you try to calculate how many ovens they have, there's no way they could bake that many cookies.
Yep.
And the callback is like, oh, obviously that many Jews could have been killed in the Holocaust because it's not possible. There's that one, and then have you ever heard people talking about the pit bull problem?
No.
Oh, sure. So somebody will make a video, an innocuous video. People like Nick Fuentes or Brittany Venti have done this. They make a video being like, hey, pit bulls, despite being only 10% of the population, commit 50% of the attacks on other people. Now, I'm not saying pit bulls aren't dogs. Do you see where I'm going with this?
Yes, I do. I totally
Yeah,
do.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. People do. Yeah, yeah. He engages in like a ton of dog whistly stuff like that. And then there was that video that was leaked of him saying like, oh, I don't think there's anything, if you're a white person and you want to fuck a black person, you can do that. It's just degenerate like bestiality is. It was like the quote I think that he had. But
So
yeah,
that's the guy you debated along with Sargon of Akkad, or Sargon of Akkad
yeah.
was on the other side. And who else was on your side on that one?
Do you know Hassan Piker?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I know Hassan.
Yeah, yeah. Wait, are you in New York or are you in LA? You're in New York, aren't
I'm
you?
in Boston.
Oh, Boston. Okay. Oh, we should have saw each other at PAX East when we were in Boston, but
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. That's true.
yeah.
Well, listen, it sounds
Mhm.
extraordinarily sophisticated what's going on that
Yeah.
channel, but I would love to participate.
For sure, yeah. The next one should not have like I don't want to platform people on that tier of like Nick Fuentes. That was like a last second thing. So hopefully like we
Yeah.
aim for bigger people. We were aiming for Blair White last time too, but then she bailed as well. But yeah, I don't know.
And
Yeah, I'll
she's
keep
right
that.
wing, right?
No, of course not. She's liberal. What are you talking about?
Oh, I thought that. No, are you kidding? I actually I
No,
don't
I'm
know
sorry.
anything about it.
I'm kidding. She's like Milo, where they say they're left wing, but they're basically just like token figures that people on the right use to shit on trans people or gay people.
Oh,
from
okay, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
yeah,
what I thought.
yeah,
That's always exciting.
yeah.
Okay, good. Well, listen, next time we'll do a minute by minute analysis of Candace Owens' new program, which is endlessly fascinating. If you haven't seen it, I recommend that you check that out.
Wait, on what? Not on like Fox News or something, is it?
I think it's like a PragerU show or something like that.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's another bad faith actor that can just totally be dumped from the internet and nothing of value would be lost.
Supposedly, I was debating her March 18th, and it's a story for another day. But in any case, no
Mhm.
debate is currently scheduled. I think is the most important sort of top line from that. All right, we've been speaking with Destiny Stephen Bonnell, now located in Los Angeles. I don't know why I kept sending you Central Time because you're actually on Pacific Time, but
I
don't know.
used to live in Nebraska the last time we talked about. I'm
Okay.
LA Steve now, so yeah.
That must be why. All right, man. Really appreciate it. Appreciate you joining me, and love doing this.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I appreciate it as well.